Hello, Susan Young here, and today we'll be covering an interview with a shopaholic.
And start the recording. It looks like it's recording. Hey, friend, this is Brad with Zero Debt Coach, and I wanted to welcome you to our show today. Basically, I have my friend Susan Young with me, and Susan is someone that we sort of met each other via the YouTube universe, and I discovered her content as someone who is what I would say is is recovering from a shopping addiction and has a fantastic YouTube channel, which I'll leave in the video description below. And she really has a heart for helping people, through their shopping addictions. Now, for me as a financial coach and having coached, literally hundreds of students through the debt elimination process, I have a sneaking suspicion that this is a bigger issue than is what is talked about in our culture. So I immediately wanted to have Susan on, introduce her to my audience so you guys can kind of get to know her. And then, just be listening for some of the elements of her story and how she's helping people sort of address their shopping addictions and kind of helping work through those. So join me in welcoming Susan Young. Susan, welcome. And why don't you just take a couple of seconds and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do, what you like to do.
Well, I'm live in a suburb of Detroit, and in Michigan. And I work for Ford Motor Company. I'm an assembly line person. I make parts for the Mustang car.
Wow. Yeah. Very good. Well, excellent. Well, so I just want to kind of jump into this. I wanted you to kind of just open up about, how you discovered that you had a shopping addiction and explain a little bit about what that means to our audience.
Well, it's been all my life. I've been a spender, spending money, and it wasn't until after my divorce where I realized I had a real serious problem. During my marriage, I went through $20,000 of debt that I accumulated, and disappointed my husband, and I couldn't stop spending, so we ended up divorced.
Yeah. And so what was that time frame? Like, how long ago was it that you discovered that this was a problem, went through your divorce?
Well, that's been about 15, 20 years from now.
Okay.
Been about that much time.
Okay. And so what was the curiosity that I have, and I think our audience would have, is like, what was the process that you went through to discover, like, when did you realize, like, you know what, I think I have a problem with spending money and shopping?
Well, I didn't do anything about it till about 5 years ago, but I knew after my divorce I had a problem, but I just couldn't stop spending.
Yeah. So
after my divorce, I went through, I got in debt again, about $100,000 in debt.
And you said that when you kind of discovered that this was a problem, you went to your family with, for help. So what did that look like?
Yeah, I went to my family, and my sister volunteered to help take care of my finances for me. She takes care of all my bills, and just gives me money for food and medication and stuff.
Okay. And so how long ago was that?
About five years ago.
About 5 years ago. So what you're saying is about 5 years ago is when you really discovered, like, this was a problem. It was something that you decided, you sort of made up your mind that you were going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And by that time, I know, from previous conversations that you said that there were several cycles that you went through where you would accumulate debt and then you would get out of debt. You said that when you were married, you got in $20,000 of debt. And then after you were divorced, you went through another cycle where you had, $100,000 worth of debt. So tell me a little bit about the cycles that you went through.
Yeah, it was when I was married, I got about $20,000 in debt. And after I got divorced, I bought a house and I kept spending money on that house. And I got about $100,000 in debt. But I went and paid that off. I moved out from that house. I had to sell the house, but I lost it. I was sold it as a short sale.
Right.
And then I moved in with my parents to take care of them.
Mm.
And that helped me to pay off that debt. And then after my parents passed away, then I moved in. I bought a house now that I live in now. But I accumulated about $35,000 in debt for
Okay.
after trying to sell. I purchased. I was trying to sell my books that I wrote. And I spent a gob of money on trying to market the books.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me $35,000 in debt there.
Wow. So I'm counting 3 different cycles that you went through. 20,000 at the end of, or in the process, in the end of your marriage, then 100,000 refinishing a house, and then you paid all of that off, and then you got into another 35,000 spending money going through the publishing process for one of your books. Yeah. It
was about three different times.
Yeah. And so was that within the last 5 years that you kind of went through this process where you engaged the help of your sister and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm still paying the 35,000 off.
Gotcha. Okay. And so how much more do you have to go there?
About 10,000, a little under 10,000.
Wow. So, I mean, I think it's remarkable. One of the things that's remarkable about your story is that each time you've gotten yourself into debt, you've actually paid the debt down yourself. You didn't try to declare bankruptcy or any of that kind of stuff.
Nope. I paid it off myself.
Wow. That's impressive. So just kind of drilling down, I guess, over the course of this past 5 years, $20,000 paid it off, $100,000 paid it off, $35,000, you're $10,000 from paying that off. What was the moment that you kind of decided, like, all right, this is enough. I've had it with this. I want to get out of debt. I want to stay out of debt. And then, in recognizing the shopping and spending problems that you have, start to engage your audience. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was when I went into $35,000 debt. That's when I decided that's it. I got to do something about this. And that's when I went to my family and got help from them.
Yeah. And so
that was my last straw, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, a lot of, people in my audience know my story about how I paid off $43,000 worth of consumer debt in 2.5 years. And it was a very similar process for me. It's a very similar process for a lot of our students. They have that kind of moment in time where they're like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to do something about it. So it's very interesting that you engaged, your sister. And I will say, for the benefit of my audience, it's really rare and not something that we actually advise in most cases, to just blindly trust someone in your family to help you, with your finances. Normally we're recommending getting your finances organized, getting them on a budget, kind of learning those skills yourself. And so, it's really awesome that you have such a trustworthy, sister and a trustworthy family. But that's something that I definitely want to caution my audience, just be very, very careful with that. Because, I've seen more than once, and I'm sure you have probably heard this in, your interaction with your audience too, that, you can get really, hurt by family in some cases.
Yeah. Some families you can't trust.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you're really, really fortunate in that way. So one of the things that we always talk about, it's really, really important as part of our debt elimination process, is your why. So what has been your why in, especially over this past 5 years, the 35,000, deciding enough is enough? What has kind of kept you going?
Well, I didn't save up money for retirement, so that's my reason for keep going.
Mm-hmm.
To pay it off and try to save money.
Yeah. And
otherwise,
so,
as it is, I gotta wait till I'm 70 just to retire.
Right. Yeah. So that's a really strong why. And one of the things I like, that you said in one of our previous conversations, and you alluded to it here as well, is that you have always taken personal responsibility to pay your debts off. And so you've been very motivated to do that. And then obviously a big part of what you're trying to do now is save money to retire. Something that I really had to address when I was going through my own debt elimination journey was, and many of our students do as well, is my belief system around money. And so you talked a little bit about, just your family, like growing up with, 4 sisters and one brother. And so tell me a little bit around, about your belief system around money and like what you've had to kind of address and change around that going through this process.
Well, we had 6 kids in the family, and we had the money was real tight, and I had to wear hand-me-down clothes, and I never got anything new. Well, it was all hand-me-down clothes. And so growing up, I just we didn't have much, So I think from that, that's where I started spending money on myself, because I didn't have much when I was a kid. That's what got me spending, I think.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you guys didn't, and this is pretty common, you were never really taught how to handle money, how to budget. It wasn't something that you guys really talked about in your family. Right.
Nobody taught us how to handle money. My mom took care of the money, and she never taught us.
Yeah.
My dad didn't want any part of handling finances.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I've found this with a lot of our student population too. One spouse is usually much more into it than the other. So what we're always trying to do is get, both of them engaged. So in terms of, having addressed, some of the, family of origin issues, I guess you would say, in terms of not having control of your money and not knowing how to spend and kind of working through some of these things, what have been some of the biggest or toughest sacrifices that you've gone through in the process that you're in now?
Well, just like my house that I lost, I had to sell it as a short sale because I didn't have enough money to keep paying the payments. So that was a big loss that I went through.
Mm-hmm. And you'd mentioned something about like sticking to a budget, like your sister kind of helps you stay on a strict budget. What's that been like?
She watches my spending. Every little penny, she watches it. She's got access to my checking account, and she watches any kind of spending I do, and she lets me know if I will go over the limit,
Yeah.
If I spend too much, she gives me only so much money for food, and if I spend that on something else, then I'm short food money.
Yeah, it's gone, and that's and that's a big thing. One of the things that we teach as we're leading people through the debt elimination process is for to have people try to get on the envelope system, the cash envelope system, because if you have $400 for groceries in an envelope and that money is gone, it's just gone. And so one of the things, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, one of the things that is such a problem in our culture, and I think a big reason why so many people live paycheck to paycheck, is now you have this artificial, unlimited money supply, quote unquote, by using a credit card. So a lot of people are not kind of forcing themselves to live on a budget or have those physical barriers of, okay, well, I've got $100. When the $100 is gone, I don't have any more money to spend. They'll just throw it on a credit card. And so, yeah. And so that's been, it sounds like that's been a really good, sort of physical barrier for you.
Yeah.
So what does it, in terms of where you've come, over the past 5 years, how does it feel to at least be on your way to being out of debt and saving for retirement? Like how is that different from how you've lived in the past?
Well, I've learned I have to cut back quite a bit on my budget. I mean, it's my spending. I've only got so much for food, and that's it. I have credit cards. I could easily go on my credit cards and spend.
Right.
But I don't do it because I know that I got a limit,
Mm-hmm. But do you feel like you have like a sense of hope for the future, whereas maybe in the past, you were just kind of living in this fog of spending and not knowing what you spent and dealing with the consequences later?
Oh yeah, I believe that I'll save the money for retirement and live good in retirement.
Yeah. So this is kind of an opportunity for you to be the coach here for our audience. Like what are, having gone through what you've gone through. And I think one of the most remarkable, aspects of it is how you've gone through several incarnations of this process and paid down your debt each time. What are 2 to 3 pieces of advice that you would give someone who's ready to get serious about addressing their debt or addressing a potential, money spending or shopping addiction that they have?
Well, they don't want to end up like me, not having any money for retirement. I mean, that's a big mistake I made.
Yeah.
That they need to, save their money and budget, get on a budget and stick to it, because otherwise they'll end up like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stay on a budget, spend less than you earn, wash,
Yeah.
rinse, repeat. Yeah. And that's great, solid advice for anyone. So I want to pivot for a second and talk about your YouTube channel and sort of where the idea came for that. And one of the things that I love about having connected with you is just how passionate you are. You don't seem to have an agenda to try to build a platform or make a lot of money doing this. You just literally really want to help people that have a shopping addiction and are in a bad place. So tell us a little bit about how the idea for the YouTube channel came about and just where you are in the process.
Well, I set up a website, and I started working on social media with people, telling them, to stop their big spending, and we're trying to work with Shopaholics that way. And then when I got the idea of going on YouTube, because it's getting more personal with people.
Yeah.
Reaching out that way, to help shopaholics and people that spend too much, But I didn't know much about how to teach them a finance part. That's why I wanted to direct them to you.
Yeah.
So
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I think that, just for the purposes of our audience, like when you go to Susan's YouTube channel, one of the things that I really like about it is that you're sharing your experiences and you're very sort of motivational and aspirational. And first of all, helping people recognize that they have a problem. Because like I said earlier, I have a sneaking suspicion that in that statistic of 78% of the people living paycheck to paycheck, probably a lot more people than realize it have a problem with spending. Do you have any perspective on that in terms of like the interactions you've had with your audience thus far?
Well, so far on YouTube, I haven't had too much of an audience, but I've worked with people on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
People that said, I do have a spending problem, I need help. But I didn't know how to direct them for finance part. That's why I'm glad I ran across you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
I was directing them to a website that would help them get on a budget, but.
Right. Yeah. And that's, yeah. So what are your plans for the future with that? Like, what are you hoping to do with your platform and, just reaching as many people as possible?
Well, I like to work with shopaholics and help them realize what's motivating them to do that, and then help them with their finances through you.
Mm-hmm.
And, because shopaholics, a lot of them, they're responding out of their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's their emotions that get them in trouble. That gets them to spend, and some of them may have, issues in their past that might cause them to spend.
Right. And so what you're doing is helping them identify those triggers and kind of work through them psychologically and emotionally, helping them. Yeah. First of all, identify. Yeah. And in our last conversation, you had mentioned, some issues with some current drugs on the market. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, I've discovered that medication I was on that called Abilify, that was causing me to be a shopaholic.
Mm.
I've been on that medicine for over 10 years, and I didn't realize it was triggering me to shop.
Hmm.
And there's another medication, trying to remember the name of it. I don't remember the name of it, but I have it in one of my videos I have about it.
Yeah.
That it's a medicine that they use for Alzheimer's patients.
Okay.
That medicine can help them with them being not as what's the word for it?
Prone to overspend or
Prone
be,
to overspend. Yeah,
yeah, it's, yeah, I know. I'm trying to find the word as well. It's impulsive.
impulsive. That's the
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too. And part of the reason that I connect so much with the way that you put your content out is I think that there is some degree with, with our audience. It's dealing, once you've gotten to that place where you've figured out, all right, I have a problem. I need to address it. There's more month left at the end of the money. I have too much debt. There's this process of organizing your finances, which can be overwhelming in and of itself, just getting everything on a list so that you can then put it into a budget. And then, part of our process is, like I was asking you earlier, what's your why? Like, why do you want to engage in this? It's because it's going to be difficult. There are going to be times that you want to walk away from it. And, a big part of kind of sticking to that is walking through, what their beliefs around money are, what their why is. And I'm hopeful that, this interaction, and people that are able to consume it, helps them, recognize that, hey, maybe I need to go check out some of Susan's videos. I think I may have, a problem with spending. It is a problem in our culture, to begin with, but I think that there, like I said before, there are definitely some, some other things going on, with a lot of people that they may not be aware of. So tell us how we can find you.
Well, you can look through Stop Big Spending. That's the name of my channel, Stop
Okay.
Big Spending.
Okay. And I'll leave a link to the video in the video description below to your channel. And you said you also have a website as well?
Yeah, stopbigspending.com.
Okay. Great. Yeah. And so you're Stop Big Spending on YouTube, stopbigspending.com. Susan, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. I'm hopeful that it will help a lot of our students or a lot of our audience connect with your content. I'm really want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I think it's great. I think it's much, much needed. And yeah, thank you so much. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
All righty.
Hello. That concludes our interview with a Shopaholic. I will leave the information in the comments below about Brad Long. Check out my website at www.stopbigspending.com. Check out my video concerning shopaholics and a medication cure. If you like this video, hit the like button below. See you on YouTube and see you on social media. You have a great week.